Hello, investigators, and welcome to Until the End of Time. My name is Veronica, and this is the very last preview season update for the Scarlet Keys preview season. And that's a little sad. I've been very excited to do these, but don't worry, there's still more than 40 cards unrevealed for the Scarlet Keys, so I am sure I'll have plenty more to talk about after this video. But first, we are going to be talking about 6 new cards today. Embezzled Treasure, previewed by Obscure Studies. Surgical Kit, previewed by Playing Board Games. Martyr's Vambrace, previewed by Drawn to the Flame. Disguise, previewed by Reddit. Pay Your Due, previewed by Optimal Play. And Grey's Anatomy, previewed by Tango and Plan. I wouldn't say that we're saving the best for last, but there's definitely some really exciting cards in here. So I'm very happy and very excited to talk about them. First up, we have Embezzled Treasure, previewed by Obscure Studies. This is a 0 cost, 0 XP rogue card with an intellect icon. It has the illicit trait, as all great cards do, and it's also an item. It has 2 abilities. A free trigger that lets you exhaust Embezzled Treasure to move up to 2 resources from your resource pool to the Embezzled Treasure, and you can have a maximum of 10 resources on it. And then a forced effect when you resign or the game ends. For every 2 resources on Embezzled Treasure, an investigator of your choice begins the next scenario of the campaign with 1 additional resource in their resource pool. There's a quick note. There's a bunch of weaknesses that have similar sort of terminology that give you some kind of punishment when you resign or the game ends that also trigger when you are defeated. That's not the case for assets. There's an explicit exception for weaknesses. So you need to survive to get your money, which is a very rogue thing to do. And so make sure you have the I'm out of here to keep your money safe. That's maybe one of the most rogue cards, like meta interactions that we've seen in a long time. Because you gotta stay alive to keep your money. For the effect of the card, it is a build your own another day, another dollar. Given how much money you have to invest for this effect, I think it is more of a card for like big money archetypes, where you want to build up this pile of money so you can use effect like Well Connected to stay ahead of the game. But maybe near the end of the scenario, you don't need all of that money and you're going to let it go to waste. Well, instead you can put it on the Embezzled Treasure and start the next scenario with a bit more money. Because of the investment required and the fact that you need to put five turns worth of money on this card for it to pay out fully, I don't expect it will be an auto-include in every deck. But if you want the Guardian to have a good time, you can always give them a little bit more money. And in general, setup economy is always very strong, right? Getting money is great early in the game because it helps you play setup, and then you can take your late game money and put it on the Embezzled Treasure. 2 cards that I think work quite well with this are the Underworld Market, previewed earlier this season. This gives you a 10 deck illicit market deck, which you can then reveal 2 cards from every turn and kind of cycle through that. You can put the Embezzled Treasure in the Underworld Market, and then you don't get the card isn't sticking in your hand doing nothing until you get to the end of the game and you know you have enough money to make it worthwhile to play it. At that point, you probably, or hopefully, have a fence, which means you don't even have to play the action cost to put Embezzled Treasure into play, as fence can give illicit cards fast. Our second card is Surgical Kit, previewed by Playing Board Games. It was their final preview. They've done a lot this preview season. I must admit I haven't actually heard of them before this preview season, and I'm glad to have seen them now because they've done some pretty cool videos. This is the first of 2 high XP Vincent cards we're going to be talking about in this video, and I'm assuming these XP cards were held back because Vincent himself was only previewed pretty recently. The Surgical Kit is a 3 XP asset with 2 intellect icons. It costs 2 resources. It has the item, tool, and science traits. It uses 4 supplies and has 2 abilities. The first is a reaction. When one of your card effects heals damage from an investigator, spend the supply to either make the effect heal 1 additional damage, or you draw a card and heal 1 horror. And then a double action ability to heal 3 damage from an investigator or ally asset at your location. There are 2 very important details to notice. The first being that the reaction ability only triggers when you heal an investigator, not an ally, which is a little confusing given that the double action ability does heal allies. And the second thing is that double action ability doesn't use any supplies. You just heal 3 damage or from an investigator or ally asset. And it's worth saying that Vincent's signature weakness, the Wounded Bystander, can of course be healed, just basically turning it into a double action weakness with the help of this card. I still expect we'll see more cards in the set to help with that, because this is still a 3xp inclusion. But, this is a great way for you to go, well, I don't want to deal with my weakness today, I'm just going to put this in my deck and not worry about it. I think the card is fun for Carolyn and Vincent. Carolyn can take this because it heals horror. And it's nice. I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding, like, combos or whatever to talk about, because it's just like, you want to have effects that heal damage, at which point you get rewarded, you get to heal probably horror, because that card draw is pretty important for making this card worth your while. I don't think having additional damage healing is what you want if this card's in your deck, because you can always heal 3 damage if you really need to. But the ability to turn to turn healing into card draw and horror healing is actually kind of nice, right? It's a very tempo powerful effect, right? You play this for 2, you're going to get 4 draws out of it, hopefully, and 4 horror heal while you're also healing your damage. I think this is a good Vincent card if you're playing kind of a straightforward Vincent deck, right? Just compounding the amount of effects you're getting out of that damage healing, which is a good thing. The fact that it doesn't take up a slot means it's just a kind of card you can drop down into basically any kind of Vincent deck, but it also means that it doesn't combo nearly as well with Scavenging, because it's very hard to get rid of. I think the only combo that I found to get this in your discard pile is to stick it to your tool belt and then discard the tool belt somehow. And yes, I have to talk about Scavenging. It's contractually obligated. I don't actually have a contract, but if I did, that would be on there. I'm making this video as if I had a contract. Next up, we have a card that I didn't know that I really wanted, but now that I've seen it, I really want to play with it. It is the Martyr's Vambrace, Remnant of the Unknown, by Drawn to the Flame. It's a 3xp Guardian card, costs 2 to play again. We've seen 2 of those right now. It has a willpower wild icon. It is an item, charm, and armor. That's an interesting set of traits, especially the armor trait we haven't seen a lot of, and charm trait is kind of interesting because there are some rumors going around that Amina might be taking charm cards. It takes up the accessory slot, and it has the following 2 abilities. You get +1 skill value while resolving revelation abilities on encounter cards. And then a reaction ability. After another investigator at your location draws a non-peril encounter card, before resolving that card's effect, exhaust the Martyr's Vambrace, you are considered to have drawn that encounter card instead. Finally, this card has 2 damage and 2 horror shock, which is actually quite a lot for a 2-cost card in the accessory slot. It's not like amazing, because obviously you want this card in play for your effects, but the fact that it's there is actually quite a lot, and it might just keep you alive if you're in a dangerous situation. So the first thing that I want to point out is that neither of these 2 abilities actually specify treachery cards. There's only a single enemy in the game that has a revelation effect. It is the cubic ooze from the blob that did everything, but more importantly, the reaction ability, likewise, it works on enemies. So you can use this to pull enemies that your teammates would have drawn to you. And given that you're the Guardian, most likely, that seems like a good thing to do, right? I don't think this is necessarily like a enemy management solution in that sense, but the fact that it also helps you control where the enemies go is quite nice. And I really think this card kind of combines 3 different cards for me. The Tooth of Edsley, Let Me Handle This, and the Riot Whistle. Like the Tooth of Edsley, it gives you a boost to treachery tests. Now, unlike the Tooth of Edsley, this is only on revelation abilities, so if you get treacheries like the Frozen Fear that test at a different point than the revelation ability, you don't get the benefit. But the fact that you get a benefit on every revelation test you're making is pretty great, right? Even if you're never using that reaction ability because it just doesn't come up, you're still getting a pretty nice benefit out of this card. I don't know if it's worth it at that point, but it's still pretty good. Like Let Me Handle This, it lets you manipulate who gets what encounter cards. And while personally I'm not the biggest fan of Let Me Handle This because I just find that it's difficult to find the space for it in a deck, the ability is actually quite powerful. And the fact that you also get this bonus while resolving the ability of whatever card you pull towards yourself means that it is more likely that you'll just be negating encounter cards completely, right? Imagine you're playing like Leo or Zoe who have 4 willpower. You have this out and somebody else draws a willpower 3 test. You're just going to pull that over and you're going to pass that test, no problem. And finally, the Riot Whistle. I did just mention it's not as powerful as the Riot Whistle because the Riot Whistle also works on things like aloof enemies or enemies that spawn at different locations. But this idea that if your teammate draws some nasty enemy that they don't want to have to deal with and you're standing right there, you don't have to spend the extra action to engage it. The Martyr's Vambrace gets a little bit extra utility by just having you draw that enemy, and I think that's pretty powerful. So yeah, I really like this card. I really wanna play this card. Like with Let Me Handle This, however, player order really matters for this card. If you have this card in your deck, you're probably going to want to be the lead investigator, because unlike the investigator phase, the Mythos phase has a fixed order. It starts with the lead investigator and then goes clockwise. That means that you probably want to have resolved your encounter card first, so you know how bad you are dealing with before deciding whether or not you want to take encounter cards off of other people. Don't underestimate the power of this card though. I've played a lot of First Watch, even in lower player counts, and the ability to have all the encounter cards go to one person who is well equipped to deal with them is very powerful. It just frees up the rest of the team and basically lets them skip the Mythos phase. And finally, well, this is somewhat of an XP expensive combo because you're going to have to get a Relic Hunter in there. I do like the idea of somebody running the Holy Rosary level 2 plus the Martyr's Vambrace, as it gives another +1 willpower bonus. And if you succeed on a willpower test on a treachery, you can exhaust the Rosary to get a Bless token. So if you didn't draw a willpower treachery, but one of your teammates at your location did, you can use the Martyr's Vambrace to move that right on over. Next up, we have a very fun new level 0 asset for rogues, the Disguise. It is a 3-cost agility icon, talent, trick, and illicit card. That trick is very interesting because unlike most trick cards we've seen right now, this is an asset. I think so far we've only ever seen trick on events, so I'm expecting that Rita players will be quite excited to see that we are now also getting trick assets. Now, it uses 4 supplies, and it has an action ability to spend 1 supply to evade. You get +2 agility for this evasion attempt, and if you succeed and the evaded enemy is non-elite, it doesn't ready during the next upkeep phase. That's great. It's an asset version of Slip Away. Slip Away is a fun event that I've used quite a bit. It's pretty good, but I think the asset version is going to be a lot better in decks that really like to evade a lot. But it does depend a little bit on player count and the investigator you're playing. So let's start with higher player count decks. I think in higher player count decks, evasion often gets treated more as a value engine than as an actual way of dealing with enemies. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. A lot of the time, somebody else is going to have to do something at a certain location, or they're going to have to move through, or whatever, which means that counting on the fact that nobody is going to get bothered by this enemy after you evaded them is very small. However, investigators like Trish, who get additional clues at locations with enemies, could still really like Disguise because it lets them pick up 2 clues, you can evade the enemy, pick up 2 clues with your ability, and then next turn you don't have to evade them again to get another +1 clue. That's pretty great. Like, it's not a big deal, but if you're playing in 4-player, locations might have as many as 12 clues on them, and getting additional action or clue compression without having to spend the additional actions to evade, that's pretty nice. Likewise, Kamani Jones might really like this. The way I've been playing Kamani Jones, after I forgot to play pickpocketing, I've been putting a lot of pickpocketings in my deck. And the thing is, pickpocketing is just great for any investigator who's evading very frequently because it's rewarding you, but it only rewards you once per turn. So one of the things that you might run into with Kamani is that you do a big evade to evade an enemy, engage them again, and then evade them again to get rid of them with their reaction ability. But as it turns out, you're not getting your pickpocketing value on that second evade. Well, with Disguise, you can spread those evades over 2 consecutive turns by having the enemy evaded the first time, get your pickpocketing value, engage them, and then you can wait until next turn to actually evade them the second time and get rid of them, getting your pickpocketing value again. Likewise, while the enemy is here, you might as well just get some followed or eavesdrop combo. Not sure how good these cards are for Kamani even now, because 2 intellect is still definitely a thing, but they're still nice clue compressions, and maybe with something like this, guys, I think these cards could see more play, because you have more reason to have enemies around that haven't been killed or defeated yet. Pretty nice. So you may have noticed that I didn't mention Finn, so there's a reason for that. I think in the higher player counts, Finn players are often trying to juggle enemies, which is to say that every turn they want to evade a low evasion, low difficulty enemy, so that they can trigger their pickpocketing, so they can trigger their lucky cigarette cases, so they can do things like momentum. They're not actually using that additional action to get away from enemies, they're using that additional action to get value. And in that kind of circumstance, Disguise is actually counterproductive because now you're no longer engaging that enemy again at the end of the turn or at the end of the round, right? During upkeep, the enemy is not kind of ready, so you're not getting your economy value. This is a problem for higher player count Finn players, but it's not a problem for lower player count Finn players, and I think keeping that distinction in mind is going to be very important. In lower player counts, I can very much imagine that Finn players are like, nope, I'm using my ability to get rid of the enemy, like get out of the way, run away, don't worry about it. And especially in solo, this is such a good card, right? Evading it for 2 turns, a lot of the time, might as well be as good as defeating them. A lot of hunter enemies even, you can just stay ahead of them, 1 location at a time, and with this ability, you're never going to have to deal with them. I really like that. I like Disguise as a enemy management tool in lower player counts and as a combo-y tool in higher player counts for rogues. Now, I do want to talk about the comparison with Slip Away a little bit more. Some people have been asking, hey, does this mean that Slip Away is just unplayable now because Disguise is so much better? And I think the answer is no. The reason is twofold. The first is that obviously everybody's favorite bearded man, Chuck Fergus, combos with Slip Away, doesn't combo with Disguise because it has to be a trick event. And so if you're going a Chuck deck, you're not going to play Disguise. But there's actually a second thing that I think is also very important, which is that Disguise takes an action to play up front. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but if you're already engaged with an enemy, suddenly Slip Away is starting to look a lot better than Disguise because you're going to have to play the Disguise, which takes an attack of opportunity, and then you can evade. Likewise, the additional cost and additional action means that you really need to get 3 or even 4 evades of Disguise for it to be worth it compared to the Slip Away. So if you're only really needing this ability once or twice a game, just stick with the Slip Away. It's probably going to be better. There are a couple of tricks you can use to get Disguise to play without taking that attack of opportunity. I feel like I haven't talked about Fence enough this preview season because like every card they've printed for Rogue is like an illicit card. So Preston Fence are crying. I understand that. But all the Finn players are very happy. And Fence does make cards fast. So you could disguise yourself fast. Very nice. Avoid that attack opportunity and then quickly evade, get out of there. Another card that I love to play in Trish is Narrow Escape. You play that when an enemy makes an attack opportunity to cancel the attack and you get +2 skill value on the next skill test. So you can play your Disguise and then use your Disguise at a +4. That's ought to get most enemies evaded, right? So yeah, rogue ways to get around it, but keep in mind, if you're only like evading semi-infrequently, just stick to the Slip Away. If you're going for a lot of evasion, Disguise might be the way to go. Next up, Optimal Play brought us the 4th basic weakness class-specific one. We haven't seen the Guardian one, it was on the back of the box, and we haven't seen anything for neutral, so maybe there is no neutral one, we don't know. But Pay Your Due is the rogue basic weakness. It is package traded, is an event, and it costs 10 whole resources. That's a lot. But as an additional cost to play Pay Your Due, you may spend any number of additional actions, reduce its cost by 5 for each additional action spent, and then as a force effect, if Pay Your Due is in your hand at the end of your turn, reveal it and take a damage. Now, I've seen a little bit of confusion about the wording. The additional actions spent, it's not about only using what are called additional actions like Leo DeLuca or Schizo Tool. Because this is an event, playing it normally takes an action and you can choose to spend more actions. Those can just be your regular actions. So you can just spend 3 actions to get rid of Pay Your Due, or you could spend 1 action and 10 resources, or 2 actions and 5 resources. Those are your options, basically. Now, if you've played a lot of rogues, you might be familiar with Preston's weakness, Lodge Depth, which is also a 10 cost event weakness. That one gives you a mental trauma at the end of the game. I think if you're Preston, you don't care about this weakness. I think it's very easy to clear. Anybody else, it might get a little trickier, but it's worth saying that, like, compare this to most double action weaknesses. Losing 5 resources is quite a bit, but if you're always going to be a rogue, if you're getting this weakness, I think that's fine. I think like double action and pay 5 resources is a perfectly serviceable weakness because it's not like rogues don't have ways to get around both of those things, right? I don't like investment as a card terribly much, but even I have to recognize that if you want to just have lots of money, you can just put cards in your deck. Even at level 0, you have adaptable, just to deal with weaknesses like this. And if you bring someone like Leo DeLuca, then even the triple action to clear this isn't taking your entire turn. And finally, it's worth saying that 1 damage a turn doesn't have to be a problem. You can just have Leather Jackin and Lonnie Ritter, and you're playing 1 resource a turn in that case, which means you might end up paying more than 10 over the course of a campaign, or over the course of a scenario. But hey, it's also healing Lonnie, and it's actually not that bad, right? Maybe you're just keeping the pay you're due in your hand the whole game and don't really care about it. It's a strategy. And then the final card for this preview season. It's Grey's Anatomy, previewed by Tango and Plan. And like a friend of mine very pointedly put it, it's not just the name of a show I've never watched, it's actually the name of a book. So Grey's Anatomy is the doctor's Bible, and in fact, I believe that is also what it is in our real world, right? It is a book written by a very capable doctor which kind of lays down the basics of a lot of surgery and medical stuff. It's a 5 XP Seeker card. It costs 3. It has a willpower, intellect, and wild icons. It is item and tome traded, and it takes up the hand slot. It has a single action ability. Choose a card at your location, any card, and test intellect 1. For each point you succeed by, choose 1. The next time that card will be healed this round, heal +1 damage or more to a maximum of +3. The next time that card will be dealt damage this round, deal +1 damage to a maximum of +3. I really like the design of this card. The fact that it doesn't use uses, it doesn't exhaust, but it's not an ability that I think inherently I associate with being this like big 5 XP effect. We've seen that in the past where we've seen this like super crazy 5 XP effect, whereas this feels like it's 5 XP, not because one use of that ability is crazy, but because you can use that ability as many times as you're willing to spend the action and passing the test, which is great. As for actually using it, any healing effect can proc this, so you can supercharge all of your healing if you're willing to devote the actions to it, because keep in mind, every time you use this, that's going to be another action, so you're going to have to balance that. But also, any kind of damaging effect, especially free trigger damage effects like Beat Cop, are going to be great with this, right? Imagine that you succeed by 3 on this test, put a little marker on an enemy, and the next time you pop off your Beat Cop, it just deals 4 damage to the enemy. That seems fantastic. There are a couple of rules clarifications here. Importantly, the card is allowed to be taken by Vincent and Carolyn. There's a little bit of like uncertainty because the card itself doesn't heal damage or horror, but FFG just basically said, listen, they're just supposed to be able to take the card, okay? And that makes sense. I think some people were worried about extrapolating this ruling, but I don't think it's meant to be extrapolated. I think it's just supposed to be, it should be working for the deck building rules, and that's it. Don't treat this like it's doing anything else weird. Vincent and Carolyn can take this. Don't worry about it. The second rule is a bit more important. I want to focus on that. So you can stack this effect, but only to a max of 3. Because it is a maximum, as opposed to a limit, it applies to all use of the ability and all copies. But it only applies to a single effect. What that means is that you could use this ability, let's say you succeed by 2, and the next time your teammate gets healed, they heal for an additional 2. Then you use the ability again, you succeed by 2, next time they get healed an additional 3, but not 4, because the ability doesn't stack above 3. However, if you go, the next time you get +2, then you heal them, you use that +2, and then the next time you use the Grey's Anatomy again, they can get another +2 again. Basically, a single instance of healing or damage can't get more than a +3 from this effect, but you can stack it on any number of cards up to a maximum of +3, and you can use it as many times as you want in a round. So for example, if you do that Beat Cop thing, right? You stack +3 damage on an enemy, you use Beat Cop, deals 4 damage, then you do another +3 damage, then you hit him again, maybe with another Beat Cop or whatever, then you can do another +3 damage, and then another. And this is a big part of why I think this card's very powerful, is there's no limit within a single round of how many times this effect can trigger, because it doesn't exhaust. I know that maybe sounds a little weird. The main thing you have to remember is that because it's a maximum, it cannot be you can't ever get +4 from this. You can never get +5 from this on a single effect, but you can get it across multiple effects. I hope that makes sense. I've seen some confusion about this. I hope that clears it up. As for using this card, I think this might be one of the best Ravenquill things we've seen in this box. So if you missed the Ravenquill, it was a customizable card that got previewed fairly early on in preview season, and it's quite exciting. So you attach it to whatever tome you've named on the Ravenquill, on the upgrade sheet, and then it has all these upgrades you can take. And the one that I'm most excited about for this one is probably the Living Quill, because using the attached assets action abilities no longer provokes attacks opportunity if you have that upgrade. The thing that Grey's Anatomy is kind of missing is if you're going to be adding damage to an enemy on your location, well, you might be engaged with that enemy, either because it's literally in your threat area, or maybe it's a massive enemy, right? You're trying to help the team fight this boss enemy. At that point, you don't really want to start using Grey's Anatomy and getting punched in the mouth. Using Living Quill prevents you from getting hit, so that's very nice. Likewise, if you're there anyway, Spectral Binding stops this from taking up a hand slot. That's very nice. Mystic Vein gives you +2 skill value while you're performing a skill test on the asset. I think that's easy to overlook, but the difficulty 1 test is actually harder than you think because you need to succeed by a certain amount, right? You can't just pass the test by, by 1, sure, but you're only getting a 1 bonus damage or 1 bonus healing. You really want to get that +3, which makes this more of an intellect 4 test, at which point it might be worth getting a little buff there. And finally, the upgrade that I'm really interested in trying with this is the Supernatural Record, which when you play the Ravenquill, you can search your deck for the discard pile in hand for a copy of this card and play it, then attaching the Ravenquill to it, which basically turns it into a search effect, right? You can find the Grey's Anatomy when you need it, which is pretty nice because it means you only have to buy 1 copy of this 5 XP card, right? You don't have to buy both copies. You can just buy the one, and then you have the Ravenquill. It's pretty great. And I think that leaves you with enough XP to actually also buy Endless Inkwell. Yep. So you could even have additional tomes or spells in case you already have the Grey's Anatomy and want something else. So yeah, I'm really excited to be trying Ravenquill plus Grey Anatomy. I think that's a fun combo. And if you're going to be cracking Vincent out of the box, give this card a try. I think it's definitely a Vincent card. And that wraps up preview season. And that feels kind of weird, but we're here and ever forward, never learning. I'm very excited still for Scarlet Keys. I want to do a live stream where I unbox the box and just talk about all the cards as I come across them. That is something I'm hoping to do, but I haven't heard anything about when we might be getting the box here in the Netherlands. So still waiting, hoping to see something. If I get more news, I'll try to share it with you through one of those YouTube posts. So keep that in mind. We're coming ever closer to Cyclopean Foundations. We've recorded 4 scenarios already. I know that I've been talking about this a lot and haven't actually shown anything, but the main reason is that I wanted to do preview season recaps first, and then in the kind of void that I expected would be coming next, have something to actually post. It's worth saying we have 45 unknown cards. Actually, I think it's 46 right now from Scarlet Keys, maybe even more. So that's enough that I don't think I can do just 5 videos, because at that point it would be 9 cards per video, which is a bit much. I think it's going to be about 2 videos per faction, plus a couple of neutrals to try and round that out. I might try to just cram the neutrals in with whatever factions they fit in best, so I don't have to do a separate neutral video. And I still want to do that deep dive on Daryl and Vincent. I am curious to hear if you want me to do a deep dive on Carson and Amina. I've done a deep dive on Kamani in case you missed that one. That's kind of the rough idea that I'm talking about, like a 30+ minute video on the investigator, the various archetypes they could embody, the various things they can do, deck building ideas, deck building considerations. It's a big video, and therefore it's also a big project for me to do. Like, I think I spent 4 days working on that Kamani video, just like putting stuff together, talking to people. So it's a big investment, and therefore I'm like, I want to do them for Daryl and Vincent because they're investigators that I'm genuinely excited about trying. I'm not necessarily there for Carson and Amina, especially because we haven't seen their deck building yet, but I'm curious to hear from you. Do you want to see those videos? Because I'm willing to make them if people want to watch them. If nobody cares, then I'm like, okay, I won't make them. And finally, I just want to thank you. Preview season is really fun. I really enjoyed it. And it's been a lot. Been talking about a lot of cards in the past several months. I was very privileged to be able to do one of my own cards. I want to thank everybody for their comments and likes and views and subscriptions, because honestly, it's really fun to get to share this with everybody. And thank you. Like, I don't really have anything more to say than thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you until the end of time.